Hey everyone, I hope that you're enjoying the video series so far. I'm really excited to give you my February 2026 reading recap. All right, before I get into the reading recap, thank you very much for those of you who have joined the channel recently. I am very excited that I was recently featured in the newsletter of my favorite bookshop, Another Story Bookshop. So if you have started watching this channel as a result of that newsletter, hello, I'm Jerry. I'm really excited that you are part of the ONYX Pages community, and I really hope that you enjoy the offerings on this channel. All right. So for those of you who are new, my reading recap is a video that's designed just to let you know what I read in the past month. It's a way for me to help my future in Jerry self out. Hi, future in Jerry, in December of 2026. I got you. The purpose of this is so that when I do my 2026 whole year recap, I won't have to hunt through videos and through various journals to try and remember what I read. And it's also a way to kind of keep up the momentum and to just pat myself on the back for reading and content creating and everything. So without further ado, I will give you my stats. I am on the story graph as ONYX Pages. So if you are on the story graph as well, please reach out to me. I am building my community there, and I would love to be story graph buddies or whatever they call it. Okay. So according to the story graph, I read 2 books. I say that like it's not true. It's accurate, obviously. I read 2 books in February 2026. I read 653 pages. You're going to hear beeping and like plates and stuff because Tomi is having dinner, okay? And that is what we do, right? So... So she's here making herself a drink and
a non-alcoholic elderflower sparkling water drink. Just to clarify.
Just to clarify. So you're going to hear our lives, and we're happy to share that with you. So I read 2 books, 2 fiction books, 653 pages, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. But what I find really cool, and I'll show you this in, I'll put a little thing on the side, but the story graph shows you the moods of what you read. Is that gonna, there you go. It gives you the moods of what you read. So according to this, the moods were like tense, sad, reflective, mysterious, emotional, and dark, which feels kind of like my moods these days. And I read 1 book fast and 1 book at medium pace, and yeah, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. So genres, LGBTQIA, young adult short stories, literary, horror, and contemporary. And I hybrid read both of them. And yeah, I did most of my reading, it seems, through between February 15th and February 21st. So that was a little bit of my reading month. Okay, so let me tell you the 2 books I read. I also started a 3rd, but I'll talk about that in my March wrap up. So the 2 books that I read were The Black Girl Survives in This One, which is a collection, it's an anthology of horror short stories where, wait for it, The Black Girl Survives. It's literally in the title, no spoilers. And this was edited by Desiree Evans and Sarasia Fennell. And this was The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emeze. So these were the 2 books that I started and finished in February. I'm going to start with The Black Girl Survives in This One. So as you know, I read with purpose, which means I read with a goal in mind. I have a very good selection of books, as you can see, and then I have a whole other set of books in storage. I buy books and I collect books because I know that there are going to be moments when I'm going to need to read what is between those pages because it's going to help me. It's going to help me learn. It's going to help me feel better. It's going to help me delve into a particular issue. And I read for edification as well as entertainment, kind of like edifitainment, or like enterification. No, that sounds that sounds weird. Enterification. That sounds like a video that would require a different rating. Anyway, so I read for edification, I read with purpose, I read for entertainment as well. And so I picked up The Black Girl Survives in this one because right now I need stories where Black folks win, okay? When I read The Reformatory, Tananarive Due said in one, I think in the afterword, that it was very, very important that in this story there was a win for the Black main character. And I was very attracted to the idea that this collection would have stories in which the Black girl just always survived and always won. If you are feeling in these times that the times are scary, read more horror, okay? If you are having a hard time dealing with the scariness of this moment, read horror, okay? Reading horror, for me, gets me in touch with fear. But getting in touch with fear also helps me to get in touch with courage. And so I read these short stories because I'm thinking through and experiencing, as we all are, a lot of really scary things. And it can be very fortifying to remind ourselves, especially those of us who were once Black girls, right? It's very edifying and fortifying to read stories where Black girls face terrible things and survive. And that is all of the stories in this book. I recommend it for that reason alone, okay? If you were born in a decade like me, then you will remember horror where we had Black people dying. Well, first of all, we weren't even in the horror movies. But when we joined the cast of the horror movies, we would be the ones to die first, right? So if you remember like movies like Scream and so on, there was this moment in the 90s and early aughts where there would be these like spoof horror movies, and it was just ridiculous, right? And so if you remember that, then you also remember that in the mid-aughts, well, not mid-aughts, but I guess after 2010, we started to see movies where people were paying more attention to Black folks not dying, right? I actually remember when I went to my first WizCon conference, and WizCon is a conference that is like feminist fiction, including a lot of like science fiction and speculative fiction, queer fiction, and so on. I went to this panel called People of Color as Killable Bodies in Gaming, and it was talking about this very thing, that in gaming, but also in movies and in television shows and in books and in comics and sequential art, that there is this like trend of creating people of color characters and also characters with disabilities just so that you would have disposable bodies, right? And I remember thinking about this idea, this notion of killable bodies, creating characters just so that they could be disposed of, and how those images cause us to think of ourselves as disposable in other ways and not treat ourselves well, but also to think of other people who fall into these categories as also possessing disposable bodies. And that panel stayed with me to this day. And I feel like this book, The Black Girl Survives in this one, is an answer to that, is an interruption to this idea that Black girls aren't meant to survive. And of course, if you have done reading on Black feminist thought, you would have come across this idea that like we weren't meant to survive, right? Like if you think of the institutions that we're a part of, the ways in which we are used, the ways in which our values are not held up, like there is the reality that we constantly get these messages that we weren't like meant to be here. We weren't meant to survive in these spaces. And I just love the idea of the Black girl surviving. Okay. All right. That's enough of why I read this book. I feel like I've been going on for a while. Okay. So it starts here. Be warned, dear reader, the Black girl survives in this one, which is cool. Why would this need to be a warning? I see this as a celebration, but I guess it depends on who the reader is and what they think. So I'm just going to remind myself of the short stories, but as I look through the contents, and I did, what I did, and I do this whenever I read short stories, anthologies, is I rate each of the stories as I go through them, just so that I can remind myself of whether I liked the stories, and I can come back to it in a wrap-up video or a recap video and tell you my thoughts. So for the most part, I scored the stories a 4 or 4.5 out of 5. There were a couple, they're about 5 or 6 actually. I would say the average score would be 4 out of 5. There were a couple that didn't do it for me. There were a couple of stories right at the beginning that were sort of more, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say there are stories about ghosts, there are stories about vampires, there are stories about like animal horror. There was a bit of like the spooky in the woods, like run to save your life horror, a lot of like mysterious horror. There was like white supremacy as horror. Like if you liked Get Out, Them, Us, what was that one? Lovecraft Country, right? Like those kinds of stories. Like there are television shows or movies, lots of stories reminiscent of that. A little bit of gothic horror here as well. Okay, let me talk about some of my favorite stories. My number one favorite story in this book was written by Eden Royce. It was the second last story, and it was absolutely fantastic. I love Eden Royce. She's an insta-buy for me. If you haven't read her, read her. I've interviewed her on this channel. It's called Local Color, and it was just amazing. Eden Royce does such a great job of teaching us about culture and magic and whatever she writes, and this had this really satisfying twist at the end. There's also a story called Fox Hunt by Charlotte Nicole Davis, who wrote The Good Luck Girls, and that was also really fantastic. It was the last one. There's this story that talked about the like body shaming and about this whole like fixation on being super skinny and being like eating vegan and that as sort of like a bit of a cult. That was kind of a really interesting horror story as well. And I'm glad that there was a story about the horrors of like basically eating disorders, but being masked as like eating super healthy and living a really healthy life. Yeah, and one of the things I really enjoy about Black horror is there's always another layer on top of the scary thing, right? Like the monster also has their own story, and there are a couple of stories in this book, several stories in fact, where the monster had a story to tell, and an unlikely relationship developed between the Black girl who survives and the thing that she survived, or the being that she was afraid of. So I 100% recommend this short story collection for those of you who are interested in horror or who are interested in reading with purpose in this time, for the purpose of finding ways to reckon with the scary things that we're seeing in the news, seeing on our streets, seeing inside ourselves and seeing inside others. It was an excellent choice for me. Okay, the second book, you good? Okay, the second book I read happens to match what I'm wearing. And this is The Death of Vivek Oji. And I really enjoyed this. I cried, friends. I cried, and I don't usually cry when I read, but this was really, really, really lovely. So why did I choose this book right now? So I will probably be reading a lot of stories that involve death and ancestry and passing, because that's, I've got a lot of elders in my life, and I just want to read more stories about like spiritual inheritance, elders transitioning into ancestors. I just want to read more about that so that I can fortify myself, right? And so Vivek Oji is the main character in this story, and the story is told from various perspectives, and it just takes us into the life of this particular person. So we see Vivek, we see his how when he was born, we see his family, we understand his relationships with his neighbors, relationships with people he went to school with, the relationships that his parents have with each other, and it was such a rich story. It's a tragic story because there is the death of Vivek Oji that we have to contend with, but we learn so much about Vivek's life and strength and power, and how Vivek impacts all the people around them. I would definitely say pay attention to trigger warnings if you, beyond just reading about death, if you read this book. I also feel like I'm not really giving you a lot of substantive content, so I'm just going to read the inside flap and then talk a little bit more about it. So one afternoon in a town in southeastern Nigeria, a mother opens her front door to discover her son's body wrapped in colorful fabric at her feet. What follows is the tumultuous, heart-wrenching story of one family's struggle to understand a child whose spirit is both gentle and mysterious. Raised by a distant father and a compassionate but overprotective mother, Vivek Oji suffers disorienting blackouts, moments of disconnection between self and surroundings. As adolescence leads into adulthood, Vivek finds solace in friendships with the warm, boisterous daughters of the Niger wives, foreign-born women married to Nigerian men. But Vivek's closest bond is with Osita, the worldly, high-spirited cousin whose teasing confidence masks a guarded private life. As their relationship deepens and Osita struggles to understand Vivek's escalating crisis, the mystery gives way to a heart-stopping act of violence in a moment of exhilarating freedom. Compulsively readable, teeming with unforgettable characters, The Death of Vivek Oji is a novel of family, friendship, and the self that challenges expectations, a dramatic story of loss and transcendence that will move every reader. That's completely accurate. It definitely gives all of the things it promises. If you have read Vivek Oji's, I just looked at the cover and realized what the cover is and what it depicts, and it's really beautiful. If you've read Akwaeke Emezi's work, and I think I spoke about this earlier, you'll know what to expect, right? It's dark. It's got a lot of speculative elements that are woven really nicely into the plot. I love the characters. They were just super vibrant and alive. There were so many moments of tenderness and softness and heartbreak that I loved here. It was a pleasure to see Vivek as Vivek grows and makes choices and understands himself. It was just beautiful, so colorful and vibrant. Just a really, really lovely, lovely book. So these were the two books I read in February. I read The Black Girl Survives in this one and The Death of Vivek Oji. I will provide like a standalone review of both of them, and I would say that I recommend both of them. In February, I also started but did not finish The Best of All Possible Worlds, so I will talk about that a little bit later. That is the end of my video. I would love to know what books you read in February. That's number one. I have some instructions, okay? So what books did you read in February? Please let me know in the comments. Second, have you read The Death of Vivek Oji? or the black girl survives in this one? If so, I would love to hear what you thought about them. And in particular, and this is a bit of a shout out to Thistle and Verse, because Chloe loves a short story, and whenever they read a short story, they read it very deeply. So if you read this anthology, Chloe, I'd love to know what you thought about it. And okay, I would really love for you to engage in the comments. That would be amazing. And you could leave an emoji. So if you want, you can leave something that matches this cover and something that matches this cover, 2 different things. Okay, this is the pink series, so if you want to do some pink, you can do that. And what I love, what are you thinking?
I'm just thinking that I love listening to you, so what are you thinking of asking people to do?
So I was thinking, so first of all, I love cascading comments. Okay, I'm gonna do this in every video because a couple of you are doing it and I totally love it. Shout out Whitney, shout out Brittany. So a cascading comment is when you comment throughout the video, right? So you're commenting with maybe a timestamp, or you're just commenting, and then you reply to yourself. And what that does is it creates a cascade of comments. And then when I read them, then I can respond and we can have sort of like a conversation, and it's very cute. So if you want to do that and do multiple comments where you're replying to yourself, then I can talk with you. I really get a lot of joy. I do it while I'm on my commute, and I love doing that. So please cascade comment. The other thing that I'm interested in is if you if you have questions for me. I am, and I think I mentioned this in one of my videos at the end of 2025, I want to start responding to your questions in videos. So what I might do is choose one question per series and answer your questions. So I am open to questions about my reading, like how I read, questions about annotation, questions about books that I'm interested in, anything that is related to reading, to books, to reading with purpose, to my rating sort of like comment system, the 7 calorie shells, or anything about this channel. Totally open to responding to questions about that. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to read with purpose. I will see you in my comments, and I hope that you enjoyed this video very much. Bye everyone.